This is Rewired. I'm Jeff Cook.
I'm Katie Whitlock.
Katie, we are doing today what we promised we'd do at the beginning, is kind of hit some of the debated, contentious topics in the Enneagram world, starting with stance.
I actually don't even know if we disagree technically, but we're both good at debating things. So it'll be fun.
I think that shows us to be mature, open-minded scholars.
What's that quote? That's like the mark of a healthy mind, is to be able to argue something you don't believe in.
I like that.
Whatever. Somebody said that.
Whoever said it, it's true.
Yeah.
But I'm open to it being false. In our circles, did you like that?
That was funny. I did like that.
In our circles, we do a lot of work on terminology behind the scenes with people that we love and care about and are in conversation with. And one of the big terms that's getting bantered about quite a bit is the stance and what it should be called for ones, twos, and sixes. There are four terms that seem to be prominent and in play, which is dependent, compliant, responsive, and reactive. So for TJ and I, when we published our book, we went with reactive, and I think there's arguments for the other three, but I would love to note that compliant seems dominant and has been a primary term for a while. I could give the history on that. Dependent has snuck in. I'm not exactly sure where dependent actually came from.
I learned dependent. When I learned this stance, I learned it as the dependent stance. So I don't know if that's a Stabile thing. I don't know if that's a Roar thing.
The logic is going to be there for all of these types. You want to pitch how you come to this?
I think I brought this up. Did I bring this up as a topic to talk about to you?
You did.
Because, like I just said, I learned it as dependent. And then, surprise, surprise, Joey Shuey, hello, says that when she teaches it in corporate, you can't call people dependent because they don't like it. So what she says is responsive. And so I just want to talk about what we think. Like, if we do think responsive is a better word, or like Jeff said, he and TJ say reactive. What's the difference between responsive and reactive? Does it matter? All the things. What are these? And what I wanted to argue that I wanted to do this debate because I am interested in, for Joey's work, it's really important because she does corporate. It's really important that she does have words that people can see themselves in. Yeah. But for me, I don't do corporate, so I don't think that's as important. I would like a word that describes what's actually happening, even if it hurts your feelings, kind of, right? Like, if you are being compliant and you just don't like being told that you're compliant, well, too bad, right? Because that's what we're going to call it. So I wanted to have a debate about what we actually think is going on in, now I call it the responsive stance, but in the responsive stance, what do we think is actually happening, and what word do we think actually fits those things best?
Bang. Brief rundown. I'm going to give the quick 2-minute history. Stances in terms of Enneagram come out of Karen Horney's work. That is, Enneagram scholars grabbed Horney's work and applied it to Enneagram. Horney was a disciple of Freud. She identified a pattern for each of the stances, the moving towards, moving against, moving away from. And that was a big idea for her in terms of how human beings function. Enneagram folks grabbed those, applied them to 3 sets of triads, and that's where stances really emerged. Riso and Hudson ended up building on that, I know, in Wisdom of the Enneagram. And when talking about ones, twos, and sixes in particular, they want to use phrases like others directed, or seeking to meet expectations, or aligning themselves with norms and authorities. That attention to what's required by others is big for Riso and Hudson, and that brings up the image of dependence, and it brings up the image of compliance, and that's where those phrases really begin to take some anchor. Helen Palmer's work pushes into orientation towards the expectations of others. That's building on Riso and Hudson in part, but she comes from a different school, and there is language in Palmer that goes towards something like attuning oneself to the demands of something. Ones, twos, and sixes, Palmer wants to argue, need feedback. And that comes out of that thinking repression, that feedback is essential for ones, twos, and sixes as they are in the world in order to secure their sense of self. A lot of the external reference comes in that space of ones and twos and sixes externally referencing. That is, they're reacting. Well, I can't use that word yet. They are
You can say that
seeking
neutrally.
to get feedback in that space. Chestnut in her work is going to be a little bit more blow open ones, twos, and sixes and show the distinctions. With Chestnut's work, she wants to say that ones are super ego driven and that they are outsourcing judgment to their inner critic. And so the dependence or compliance comes in that space. And Riso and Hudson do this as well. But the idea that the superego is what the one is being compliant to or dependent on for their sense of self, that's the big idea. For twos, it would be something like outsourcing, their value to the relational approval of others. They're others aware and dependent on others' response to them and what they do in the world. And for sixes, it's much more of an authority oriented, outsourcing their certainty to the group.
Their thinking, if you will.
Correct. To push back further, the narrative tradition, Naranjo and the rest, they also want to have more of an object relation interpretation of this. So for that school, ones are dependent on some sort of ideal. Twos are dependent on others' needs and affection. Sixes are dependent on some sort of external authority or structure. All of these end up, it's going to overlap, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, with the idea of the external reference point. So with that in mind, the term of what do you call these types? What's the primary? Are they dependent? Are they compliant? Are they responsive? Are they reactive? That's the question at hand. So ends my little history lesson on Enneagram, as far as I can tell. What are your thoughts there?
I don't know if this connects directly to what you were saying, but just before we recorded this, I had a conversation with a bunch of 1, 2s, and 6s. And something that came up was that I want, if you're a 1, 2, or 6 listening to this, I want you to carry with you. Not all parts of you are responsive. I'm going to keep using the word responsive, but are responsive, right? So if you're a 2, I have a lot of 2s tell me, well, I'm really independent, right? I do things by myself a lot. So I'm not saying every single part of your personality is responsive, but if you are a 2, what you represent to me is responsive feeling. So I'm talking about your feeling is very responsive. If you're a 6, your thinking is going to be very responsive. And if you're a 1, it's going to be your doing, right? So I guess going forward, I want to make it clear we're talking about this very core part of you, right? But that's not to say that you can't be independent or that you can't be an introvert or that you can't do kind of all these other things. I'm just talking about this very specific part of how you're hardwired is hardwired to be responsive, right? Or whatever we're going to call it.
Going down that road of overlapping 1s, 2s, and 6s, their centers, feeling, doing, thinking, with these terms, would the idea that 2s are compliant feelers work? Or dependent feelers?
Right.
Would that be an adequate description of a 2?
Do you think we should give our definitions of responsive, compliant, and dependent first?
Sure.
I feel like I want to give.
Yeah, what do you see as the differences there?
You're going to have to do the reactive one because I don't have reactive definition.
That's fine.
So
I would defend responsive or reactive as the best terms.
Yeah. I guess we can just say that right away. I actually agree. I also vote responsive or reactive, just for
maybe,
so everyone
maybe we're going to pile on then
Yeah.
on why the terminology for compliant and dependent
we think is
should be moved on from.
So I think I'm going to start with. I should give one definition. We should talk about it, and then we should give the next definition and talk about it again. So I want to do compliant first because I think that's the worst one. I think compliant for me is at the bottom of the list for what's going on in these numbers. So I'll read it twice so that everyone can kind of get it in their heads. It's kind of a long definition, but this is what the dictionary says. Compliant means inclined to agree with others or obey rules, especially to an excessive degree. Acquiescent, meeting or in accordance with rules or standards. So let me do that again. I'm just going to read the beginning because I think that's the important part. Inclined to agree with others or obey rules, especially to an excessive degree. What are your first thoughts about that?
So I actually think compliant is better than dependent.
Okay.
Because I think at least the argument can be made that 1s, 2s, and 6s are trying to meet some sort of external standard, that they are seeking to comply with whatever the rules are. And so compliance in that sense is an alignment. It is an outsourcing of authority. That's what I think complying has to be. You are outsourcing authority to some standards. Those might be ideal standards or emotional standards or authority standards that give you your sense of self and grounding. And this is your way of getting what you want in the world. Because that's what stance has to be about. It's how do you get what you want in the world? The 1s, 2s, and 6s, the argument for compliant would be, well, they comply with the ideals or the tribe or some authority or, the relational standards that are required. I think that's the best argument for that as being the term. What do you think?
I think I don't like compliant because it is such a behavior word to me. So saying inclined to agree with others or obey rules, that's all behavior. That doesn't say anything about why you're doing that, which is the whole point of the Enneagram to me. And I think when we get to the dependent definition, there is at least a little bit of this is why you're doing it. And compliant to me is it's so surface level. And it's also like, not, what if we have a really if we say inclined to agree with others or obey rules, if we have a really counterphobic 6, like, do they fit there? Right? No.
That
right?
would be my first argument.
Right.
Is 1s and 6s can be the most non-compliant
Absolutely.
of the types.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the framing would have to be something like this. When they're non-compliant, what actually happens for the 1 or 6 is that they shift allegiance from this authority to some other authority that gives them new and renewed power, vigor, and stability. So I'm moving from thinking Joe, the cult leader, is my authority to saying, no, Plato's ethic, Jesus' ethic is now the authority. It would be something like that.
So maybe it's good to keep in mind that even if we feel like these people are not compliant with us, they can still be being compliant with something else. So like technically that rule, that word still counts.
Yeah. I think that would be those who would argue for compliance as the appropriate term would say what's really just taking place is you're just shifting your allegiance.
I just think this is one of the things where like, I think this is true about these numbers a lot of times. I don't think it's the core of being in this stance. I think this is a consequence of being in this stance, is that you become compliant.
I would go with you there. I'm going to argue.
Argue the other way.
That was going to be in the. See, apparently, as was said earlier, this is the mark of a brilliant mind. Whatever your quote was, you can see the other side. I want to argue two things. One, I want to go back to your first comment on behavior and just ask a question. Is not stance about behavior at some level? How you get what you want in the world? There is a why behind it. But in some sense, with being withdrawn, being independent, being whatever we're going to call 1s, 2s, and 6s, is about their behavior. Yeah?
A lot of the Enneagram's about behavior, right? Because that's just how we have to talk about it. If you can find a way to connect that behavior to the why of why people are doing that, why are people withdrawn, right? What is that gain? What are they gaining by being withdrawn? What are they gaining by being responsive? Why is that important to them? So I don't think when we talk about stance, we're ever going to get rid of behavior. But to me, compliance is only behavior. At least the other words start to explain a little bit of why these people are doing it.
Yeah.
And if you can get a little bit of why, you should. Because the core of Enneagram is motivation. And so I think you should try to get back to the core as much as possible. I guess that's my argument. I don't think this is like a bad word. I don't think these numbers are not compliant, right? I don't think it's the word. I think people who stop here are stopping too shallow.
I wonder if there's not some stereotyping going on here, that as you were saying, it's about behavior, and we're trying to say, look, the 1s, 2s, and 6s just routinely look as though this is what's going on, without really looking towards the why. So my primary argument against compliance would be that for me as a 1, I need internal stability, and I find it with a mind towards value judgments. And I want to feel as though I am right, because that is a source of stability. But that's going to be true for 3s. And when they say, here's my goals and what I'm seeking to achieve, like that's an anchor, and it can be foundational, and it can have real draw and pull for them. It's stability that is being looked for. Or 5s are a better example. 5s want the data. They're not compliant on the data, are they? Mm-mm. It's something different. It's that they're seeking stability in the same ways that 1s are seeking stability, where the 5 says, I'm going to find stability by understanding the facts and bending my will towards aligning with the facts. So too, the 1 is saying, I want to know what's right and most valuable, most beautiful, most praiseworthy, the objects that I ought to pursue. And that's going to be the source of my stability, alignment, and sense of self. But you'll notice if you go down that road, 5s aren't compliant.
No, yeah.
But they are compliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to pick one. We have to pick a lane.
I think that's a really good point, because here's the thing. Whatever ideal word we come up with at the end of this, in a perfect world, to me, it would so accurately describe 1, 2s, and 6s, and it would not apply at all to the other 6 numbers. In the real world, probably it will apply a little bit, whatever. But
that's exactly right.
In my perfect world, one of these words would apply so well for 1, 2s, and 6s, and really, really break down when you look at the other numbers, right? And compliance does not break down. 9s are compliant. 9s are absolutely inclined to agree with others, right? I'm inclined to agree with others. That's been a big problem for me in my life, that I am inclined to agree with others because I want them to like me, right? So it just doesn't, I mean, it also may be, like, it may be true for 1, 2s, and 6s, but it's also, like you said, it's really true for other numbers too, which means you can't use it to just describe this stance. Yeah.
A second for me, and this may be a 1 thing, is that primary for 1s is they want agency. Mm-hmm. Compliance is the opposite of agency. You could say that through my free choices I'm complying, but that would be taking my freedom to surrender my freedom. That doesn't ping right for me. What's actually taking place when I do so I do find a lot of stability through what's right, what's valuable, what's beautiful, what's praiseworthy. What I'm doing is I'm seeking to align my fullest self, my mind, my heart, my soul. I want to align them with these things that are beautiful and true and worthy. Alignment is a better image, it seems to me, about my posture. So I'm not complying with what's beautiful. I'm aligning with what's beautiful. I'm seeking to embrace what's beautiful.
Yeah.
I am, in theory, responding to what's beautiful. And so I want to be right.
Right.
And I'm open to being wrong. But
I'm choosing where to put myself.
Yeah. But again, and it's because I value agency. And so that would be a reason to think that, at least for 1s, they're not compliant.
Yeah.
And if ones aren't compliant, then the whole term doesn't work.
Right. It has to apply to all three.
It has to apply to all three. Is correct. So.
All right. Do you have anything else to say?
You're
about
convinced?
Compliant? I don't like compliant. I think it sucks.
Well, what strikes you as valuable in the term dependent for these three?
So this is where my science degree is really going to come out. Because I really don't think that dependent is wrong. Like, I think compliant parts of it are wrong. I really don't think dependent is wrong. Here's the definition of dependent for anyone listening. Contingent on or determined by, requiring someone or something for financial, emotional, or other support. Mm-hmm. Again, contingent on or determined by is the big thing for me there. So my science brain, there's dependent variables and there's independent variables, right? A dependent variable changes when something else changes. So if something in the environment changes, the dependent variable will look different, which I think absolutely happens in 1, 2s, and 6s. It depends on what it is in the environment you are dependent on. This is where I bring up the centers. 2s are attuned to the feelings in the environment. 6s are attuned to the thinking, and 1s are attuned to what needs to be done, right? But if that changes, you change. You don't have the option to not react to it, right? And so I do, in the purely like scientific version of that word, I actually do think that is pretty good. I think that is describing what's going on. So as I'm actually kind of talking myself back into dependent now. Anyway, what do you think about that?
Unfortunately, I spent so much of my time on compliant and prep because I thought that's what the term that you liked most. So I was ready for
a big
the
debate.
throwdown. Dependent, the thing, like, what is it that I'm going to start with ones again? What is it that they are dependent on? You had mentioned something like outcomes or actions. I think others want to argue that they're dependent on the moral order, or they're dependent on whatever the principle is or the right thing. It's going to fail in my mind for a similar reason, that it just doesn't describe, I think, what is going on inside my mind and heart. Like, anyone that knows me knows that I'm incredibly independent. Like I build businesses as an entrepreneur, which is as like free from others as you can get.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about, right?
Go ahead.
That's not because the 2s brought that up as well. I'm really independent. I don't need to be around other people, right? Mm-hmm. So I think this is an important point to bring up. You can have independence in your life and still be dependent in the definition of when something else changes, you change, which I have seen in you. Like when I bring up a topic and it's not what you were ready for or you want to talk about, like you'll talk about what I want to talk about, right? Or if I bring up a really good point that's going to change, a program that we're building, you respond to that, right? You immediately have changed your direction of where you're going to incorporate this new thing that needs to be thought about, right?
Feels like that's me being responsive, because as it were, if you brought up a terrible idea, I'm not going with you. I'm not dependent on this. I'm not dependent on your thinking and your trajectory, as it were.
You're not dependent on my thinking anyway. That's not what I'm saying. I think you're dependent on what you feel like needs to be done. If you feel like something needs to be done, do you really have the option to not do it? Are you really going to ever not do it?
Who doesn't have that, though?
Everyone else.
Like something needs to get done and you're just like,
yeah, that's not my job.
I don't care what needs to get done.
Yeah, I don't care. That's what I'm saying. That's the dependent part. I think you are more dependent than you think you are on this thing specifically.
Dependent on what needs to be done.
Yeah, for you as a 1.
On this front, let me elevate the idea as best I can. Yeah. This would be dependent action, or dependent. My intuitions are dependent on targets. I think so. Just twofold. One, I don't think it's a mistake to say, look, this term exposes something that needs to get named, you're not even aware of how dependent you are.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's valuable. So if you were to circle back and say what you just said, I'm dependent. What am I dependent on? I'm dependent on the outcomes.
Change when you see something needs to be done, even if it wasn't in your original plan. You change the plan to be able to do that thing. Did you teach me this metaphor? Perfection is like an ice sculpture. Have you heard that when it comes to ones?
Mm-mm.
So ones are chasing perfection, but perfection is like an ice sculpture. As soon as the environment changes, it melts. Okay. And you have to come up with a new ice sculpture, right? So your idea of what you want to do only works in this specific environment. As soon as something changes, you need to change your plan, because what's going to be a perfect plan in this new environment is different. I'm still not describing that very well.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Do you see?
I think you are actually describing how, at least I feel like I come to the world, that I have ideas, I have ideals. Sometimes they are exposed to be insufficient, and I'm challenged to reconsider those ideals, or my trajectory.
And you're willing. Like, I want to say, I think this is one of the best things about these numbers, right? To be obligated towards something other than yourself like that, right? So think about what's the most annoying thing about 3, 7, and 8s, right? It's that they can be, the rest of us can see, well, I'm a 3, but the rest of us can see that they're wrong, and they don't, because they just have a plan and they're not frickin' changing it for anything, even if it doesn't work anymore, right?
Right.
That's what I'm saying. You don't do that, and that's good, right? When something changes, you change to better do the thing.
I suppose the reason that I would push back is, I don't know, in this scenario, what am I dependent on? Like, you named it as action, but like, what am I dependent on?
So I think the problem here is that there's 2 different definitions of dependent, I think. And I think I'm operating off of one and you're operating off of another.
Okay, yeah.
To me, it's a very cause and effect thing. To me, dependent in my mind brings up cause and effect. Something out in the environment changes and you respond to it, right? Again, respond.
Oh,
right.
So unfortunately,
I will say, I don't think that this is the best word still, but I don't hate it as much as compliant. And I do think, like you said, I do think it's important for you all to recognize, like, this is something that happens to you, right? This is something that's going on.
Perhaps in terms, and this would be a nuanced take, perhaps it's the case that dependent isn't the best term for this stance, but that doesn't mean that it lacks value.
Yeah.
It can still be brought in to expose some stuff. Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is that 1s, 2s, and 6s have an external reference point. That is, we do our thinking and processing out there. We're aware, 1s, 2s, and 6s are on the front lines. We are ready, fire, aim sorts. We are just in the midst, and we're acting, and it's very, very, very present. Mm-hmm. And so there is going to be a lot of give and take immediately with the environment. Mm-hmm. What I think is really a fantastic move for Shuey. Shuey took dependent here and applied it to 3, 7s, and 8s and said where 1s, 2s, and 6s are dependent, 3, 7s, and 8s are independent.
Right, exactly.
The way that I read that is that they're not, the way that 3, 7s, and 8s are independent is exclusively emotional. That is, that they are independent, their stance is actually about the repressed center. And that's actually how a lot of people define stance, is they start with the repressed center. So I think independence is all about emotions, that 3, 7s, and 8s can shut down their emotions, stand independent. That's what independence means, is that y'all in your business doesn't affect me. I'm gonna make my choices with a severe division between how you feel about the thing and even how I feel about the thing. So too, 4s, 5s, and 9s. I think 4s, 5s, and 9s are withdrawn physically. Mm-hmm. That's their repressed center. They are in a spot that is an internal reference point. That is, they have disengaged from the physicality of engagement. And that's how you come to the term. So here would be the challenge is once 2s and 6s are thinking repressed. So whatever it's going to be, whatever term we're going to use is probably going to have to bring that element in.
I agree.
So am I dependent? Is my thinking dependent on others? Maybe. Is my thinking
Yours is
compliant
not.
on others? Correct, right?
Yeah. Oh, I understand. What you're saying. Sorry.
So what I think, and this goes to where you were going with the responsiveness, the reactivity, my thinking, I think, is much more reactive in nature. And that's why I prefer the term, is that something is happening and I need to get my repressed center around it. And that's a great description of how I am in the world. What are your thoughts?
I am so glad you brought that up because my last word on dependent is I like it. I do. I know that you all don't like it. I really, really like it, but I think it's still not the best because it doesn't incorporate that you're thinking repressed. Nowhere in the definition can you see that these people are thinking repressed. So I like it, but I don't think it's all encompassing. So I agree with everything you said. And that's why I like responsive and reactive, because to me, that's very clear that you're thinking repressed, right? Because you're just reacting. There's no thinking, right? I just see and I do. And I think that's why 2s and 6s often think of themselves as very big doers. Like when I talk about action processing, 8s, 3s, and 1s are action processors. 2s and 6s a lot of times are like, well, I do all the time. And I think it's because of this. I think it's because you're thinking repressed, right? So you just do.
Well, it's the earning side to the stance.
Yeah, true.
And it is establishing, again, it feels to me like one thing that needs to be said is that stance is about getting what you want. And the 2s and 6s earn to get what they want, and they're responding to the needs of the people in front of them. They're reacting to the needs of the people in front of them because what they want isn't, 2s and 6s don't want to achieve the goals or build the things the way that 1s, 8s, and 3s do. They want the relationship. And that's what their responsive nature is about, is what do I need to do to ensure the relationship? And 1s are the outlier.
So I think one of the things that's important to talk about here, so we're on the top 2. We're on, is it responsive or is it reactive, right? I had never thought about this, but when I brought this up this morning to my group of friends, one of them is a coach, and she's a 2. And she said, so let me give you the definition of responsive that she was reacting to. So if you look up the definition of responsive, it says reacting quickly and positively. I would take out the positively. I don't think that's important here for Enneagram. So what I'd say, the Enneagram definition is reacting quickly. That's what being responsive is, right? And she said she was having a hard time with that because in coaching world, reacting and responding are like two opposite ends of a spectrum. So reacting is not thinking about it at all, and responding is there's much more time in between stimulus and response, right? So she was saying her coaching brain was having a hard time agreeing that being responsive meant that you reacted quickly, just because she has been taught, and teaches that those are two separate things. I guess I wanted to set that up to hear what you think about it. And I think to me, that's the difference in how I am going to argue whether these numbers should be called reactive or responsive.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
So I might be speaking out both sides of my mouth here. Responsive feels like it's more mature and that it's done work on the repressed center.
Yeah.
And that would move away from, I suppose, the way that I would want to characterize the stances in terms of the terminology by really pushing into the repressed center. So if somebody is responsive, it does feel like they're, as you're saying, they are doing business fully with what's out there and not being knee jerk about it.
Yeah.
I think it's real helpful here for the 1s, 2s, and 6s to know that they're knee jerk, that thinking is last, that intuitions and feelings are forefront. And because thinking is last, the reactivity is a better description.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm going to convince myself.
What?
I was
Reactive?
so ready to say, man, I screwed that up. That whole book.
No, I think
should have had responsive.
No, I think you're right. Because here's the thing. I did not know that in the coaching world, those are two different things. So I was very, before literally this morning, I was very okay calling it responsive, because that is what you're doing, is you're responding, right? I did not know that out in the world, there are a lot of people who differentiate those two things. And I absolutely agree with you. One of the things that always shocks the 1, 2s, and 6s, especially the 2s for some reason, is learning that you are knee-jerk people. You are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's the present orientation.
Right. It's the present orientation, and it's the thinking repression. And it's, I've had ones shocked to learn that. And then we have to talk about the difference between, what's the difference between being methodical, which you are, and logical, which you are not. Right?
I'll tell you exactly what it is.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I do think that's good.
Well, it's not like 1s, 2s, and 6s don't know that they're reactive,
Yeah.
and that it gets them into trouble.
Yeah.
So how do you move if you're thinking repressed? How do you navigate the world? Notice this is where the rules and expectations and principles come in. If I just lean into those when I'm on the front lines, then I have the ability to overcome my basic urges. So I'm taught that I should turn the other cheek when somebody strikes me. That is a rule and a principle. And if I have that in hand and in heart, and I've internalized it, when somebody hits me in the face, I don't just respond with violence. I have already done the business of internalizing a principle that says this is a better way. And that allows me to overcome the momentary. Now, that's not productive thinking. It's different.
Yeah, it's relying on something else.
It's outsourcing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the alignment comes into place here for me. I have aligned myself as best I can with what I think is beautiful, valuable, will lead to the best possible life and happiness. Because I know when life comes at me, I'm going to make really bad decisions unless I do.
Yeah. This is fascinating. This is one that, so something I've been thinking about as I've been doing my early access interviews. I think every number has a contradiction in them, right? They'll say one thing about themselves and then they'll say another thing, or they'll act a different way.
Sure.
And something about 1s, and I think I can apply it to 2s and 6s too, is like, well, maybe you don't. Okay, maybe I'm going to have to scratch this.
Float it.
So what I was going to say is that 1s, they talk like they know what's right, but then they don't, right? Like, you're telling me I don't know. Like, I literally don't know. I have to find it somewhere else, right? But I think people experience 1s as people who know what's right, right? And so it's really fascinating to me to think that, I think that's just like an empathy moment for me, to think that there are a lot of people walking around who really don't know how they feel, what they think, what's right. You know, they really don't know, and they really need help, like, to figure it out, you know? And also, like, how dangerous that can be, right? I mean, not to get into, like, politics or religion, but, like, that can be really, you know, if you don't know that that's going on inside of you.
Yeah.
And someone just hands you all the rules, and you're like, great. Yeah. Right?
Susceptible to the cult leader.
You're susceptible, yeah.
Agreed. This is actually another thing that you're going to pick up in Kelly's interview is exactly this. She pointed out, and I've heard it from the other room, exactly what you're saying. Ones appear as though they have thought through all the things and come across quite confident in those spaces. But if you know a one and are in a relationship with a one, you're going to hear verbal processing about what to do all the time, and they will be asking you, what should we do? You and I, prior to this conversation, had a long conversation about, like, what are we doing as a business? And nearly all of it is me trying to get a gauge of where you're at so that I can respond and we can move forward.
That's what I'm talking about when
together.
I say dependent. That right there is what I'm talking about when I say dependent. I think that's a good example. Just to bring it back to that. You want to know what I think so that then you can base what you're going to do off of that, or whatever.
Part of that is relational, though.
Yeah. Sure.
If you called me up and said, Jeff, I'm out, I would be real sad and I would know what to do moving forward.
Yeah.
Because it would just then it would just be me. And I would be saying to myself, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do moving forward.
Well, maybe that brings up then you don't have an external thing to respond to. Like, if there is an external thing to respond to around you, you will respond to it. You don't really have the option not to. If you're just by yourself, it's much easier to think, what am I going to do? But if I really wanted to do something and you're like, sure, that sounds like a good idea. Do you think it would be easy for you to say still, but I don't want to do it, so we're just not going to?
If part of our conversation ended up being something like, you know what we really need to do with Rewired is bring in a lot more 14th century French poetry. I would say, I think we're getting way off track there. And I would not be dependent on your opinion. Yeah. I would push back hard against it.
Yeah.
So there is a, like, what happens in me here's behind the curtain what happens. I'm going to float some ideas. I'm actually looking at your face and listening to your verbal tics and cues to hear not only what you say, but I'm really keyed in on the emotion of how you say it. Yeah. To know whether or not this has energy and whether or not you have buy-in. That happens to me in nearly every conversation I have when talking to others about what we're going to build together. You might commit to something, but unless I hear it in your voice that you are in, I'll probably back off a little bit. Dependence kind of comes in there.
I guess that is, because you're not going to keep, like, the backing off part is where the dependence comes up for me, right? Because I don't think a 3, 7, or 8 would back off. They just would be like, you're stupid. I'm not bringing you with me. I'll go find somebody else, right? Or I'm going to go do it anyway. Yeah. Don't care if you're here or not.
That's true. But here, well, it brings up another question: is how much do I care about this relationship?
Yeah. So, that's a good point.
And so if the way that I am in the world is, I do know that working with other people is a better way to do what I want to do. I'm committed to that principle. So I think I come to relationships and with that in mind, that I don't know everything, that a lot of people are better at Enneagram than I am on a whole host of fronts, specifically with talking about the inner life non-theoretically. And so because of that, I adjust.
And I think that's good. I want to say that again. I don't know why I keep feeling the need to say that. I think that's good, right? I think it lets you have a much better... So another thing I've been thinking about lately is this idea that I think 3s especially can live in this, like, divorced reality from... I
want to talk about 3s actually on this front.
Yeah.
Because you're going to experience this.
Yeah, who they really are and how they're coming across to people, and how they think they're coming across to people. That can be two totally separate things, right? And I don't think that happens to 1s. I think you have a better understanding of how you're actually coming across, because you are focused on it. You're focused in this external, and you're like willing to change. I don't know. What? Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Say the claim about you don't feel like you understand how you're coming across?
No, I think really unhealthy 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think really unhealthy 3s live in a divorced reality, and they think that people think of them in a much different way than how people actuly think of them.
I see what you're saying.
What I'm saying, right?
You're correct, by the way.
They have, yeah. Darn it. They which is, I think, why it's so hard for 3s to get into the Enneagram, because it's admitting that other people haven't viewed you like this the entire time, right? But I think part of that is because we're not dependent or responsive people, right? Like we're not actually, everyone talks about 3s checking in with people and doing all and like that is true, but there's something missing, because how can we live in this total delusion of a world and also like be checking in with people all the time and like making sure that,
That's what I was going to ask you. It feels like 3s by themselves will have to do a self-assessment of their value by themselves. Mm-hmm. There's nobody else there. But if you add another person, do 3s then become, quote unquote, dependent on the opinions of others for their sense of self and value?
So, yes. I think the difference is that I feel like I have some sense of control over how people respond to me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to really verbally process this, and it's not going to sound very good. I'm going to compare myself to a 2 because we're in the feeling triad, right? Mm-hmm. The difference that I see is that 2s accept your feelings as they are, and they respond to that. I note what your feeling is right now, and then I think that I can change it. I think that I can do something to make you feel a different way.
Yeah.
2s, I think, want to make you feel better, but that's not really what I'm talking about. Like 2s, I don't see 2s believing that they have control over your emotions. And on some base level, I feel like I have control over your emotions. And I'm going to use your emotions to get what I want, which is the independent part.
Yeah.
So I guess I am dependent on the feelings, but there is, again, it's like the agency thing. Like, dependent to me, I am dependent, but I can change them to be what I want, right? So then it's not really a big deal that I'm dependent on them, because they're what I want anyway, so it's okay.
I would want to make the argument, if I was being really aggressive with my argument, I would want to say something like, notice, the argument here is about behavior. The argument is 3s can, in behavior, have leverage in such a way as to manipulate other people's emotions to their will, but internally have not gotten away from being dependent on the opinions of others for their sense of self and value. And that's why dependent doesn't work, because I can apply it to other types, and it is absolutely true of the core foundational matter at hand. Mm-hmm. They are not responsive, though, or reactive. Mm-hmm. But they are dependent, and that's why it fails.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we're not reactive? Like, if I notice someone doesn't like me.
3s can blow past other people's opinions.
Yeah. I think this is also a good time to bring up. Just because you can be reactive doesn't mean you are reactive all the time.
Correct, yeah.
And I do 1, 2s, and 6s, until you do some work, you're basically reactive all the time, I think. Do you think that's true?
I think that's correct. So the reactive in the sense that
reacting quickly.
I mean, it's only when I have this would align perfectly with Enneagram theory. It's only when I have my motive locked down that I can be independent. When I have my motive locked down, I can move into 7 space. If I've been getting what I want, if I have earned the agency and autonomy desired, of course I can move independently. But if I don't have agency, that will be primary for me in that moment. I think the 3s, let me make the argument, 3s are going to take hold of the attention they desire.
Yeah.
And that means that if you have a bad opinion of them, they're not reacting to you. You don't matter. I'm going to take hold of the attention I want.
Well, I don't know. It depends on who you are. If you're a person with authority, I do care. If you're someone I don't value, if you are a person that I do not value, then I don't care.
If it's the case that okay, let's go down this path. I haven't thought through this. So say it's the case you care about somebody's opinion and they give you a very negative assessment. My intuition is to say that the 3 immediately spins.
Like are you talking about spins internally, like starts freaking out, or spins
No,
their
like
opinion
spins,
into something good?
Yeah. Reframes the value of the person who's given the assessment.
Oh yeah.
Spins the language, undercuts the authority of the person who they had been seeking approval from.
Yeah.
That would be different.
I think my first response would be to try to change their opinion. But if I maybe knew that wasn't possible somehow, right, then I would try to convince myself that they weren't valuable, right? Their opinion is not as valuable as I thought it was. But I think I do think my first reaction would be, how do I get you back on my side? Like, I want you back on my side.
So the language that I used in the book was that 3, 7s, and 8s take hold of what they want, where 1s, 2s, and 6s earn. That's not really what's going there with the 3. The assertiveness, the aggressiveness, as it were, that can come out of 3s comes in that space. Like the claim can be remade. No. I deserve this. I deserve in a different kind of way. Like, but the taking hold of the attention is the posture.
Something I see that happens to 1, 2s, and 6s that doesn't happen to other people as much is that you just get stuck in situations that are not serving you anymore, right? It's that whole obligation thing. It's the not knowing when to leave, feeling bad for leaving, all the things, be it a work job, be it a job, be it a relationship, whatever. And I think that's part of thinking repressed, right? And I do think that's not something that really happens to 3s. Like that, maybe that would be the difference here too.
Yep.
Is that 3s don't get stuck.
Yep.
Right.
In the same way that I'm reading your emotions, when I pitch a question, should we go down this road or that road? And I'm reading your emotional cues. Same thing here. If you reject me, I'm reading your emotional cues, and those have real power in terms of my sense of self. Yeah, just way of coming to the world. I'm positive that's true of 2s and 6s.
Right.
Probably even more so than 1s.
I think it just gets real complicated when we start talking about feeling as well, right? It's any number in the feeling triad is just going to be complicated when we talk about responsive, because they're so similar. I'll just say, I think it gets complicated because 3s are feelers. We start there, and feelings are kind of inherently subjective, and the responsive stance is like the subjective stance. So that just gets complicated, but there are some differences.
No,
yeah.
I mean, our language for the 3s is TJ's language. They take the world in through the feeling center, but they don't engage the world through the feeling center. And, you take it in and it immediately shuts off.
Yeah. So maybe another good requirement for which word we pick for this stance is it needs to have something to do with how you're putting out. Dependent to me feels a little bit like how you're taking in. So of course 3s are always also going to kind of be dependent too, but reactive is how you're coming out. Right. And so maybe that's important too. Because like we said, 3s aren't really reactive like that as much.
I spent two months writing 2 pages in our book, and it's on this section in stance. It was I've already forgotten the name of the chapter, but let me pause for a second because this is important to me and I'm only going to say it to you. Well, I'm going to say it on this podcast, but I'm not going to say it anywhere else. But this was one of the things that was truly important to me. So behind the curtain, it's page 112 and 113. It's in chapter 4. And it's a section I called the perch. And it was stuff that I had learned from Joey that I wanted to frame in such a way that it worked in our system. But I spent forever on this idea. She uses the term reference point. I much prefer something like a vantage point. Like, where are you doing the work? Where are you thinking through the things? And so what I used was the image of a general, like somebody in a battle. There are some people who take the information from the front lines and they go into a tent somewhere and they do business with it internally, like in that space. And there are some people who are way distant from all the carnage, all the bloodshed. They're not experiencing any of the emotions that are on the battlefield. They're just making decisive decisions about what ought to happen very strategically from way over there. They're independent from it all. And then there are people who are on the front lines and all of the carnage is like they're covered in blood and they're having to respond in real time to what's really in front of them. That strikes me as what's most essential to stance. And I didn't know that prior to this study, but how we are interpreting things is what's actually most core to stance. And that is paired with our repressed center. Mm-hmm. And so the withdrawn types who process internally, that restriction of action, moving way over here, away from things, but doing business internally really matters. And again, the independent folks, it's the elimination of feelings that matters most in terms of the processing of the information. This is where I don't like the term processing center for this reason. It's not really, you're not processing anything. Processing center is about outcomes. Processing actually takes place in your stance. So I will routinely use assessment. I think that that's what's actually taking place with what has been termed processing center. It's you process with your stance.
Yeah. Should we do a wrap up?
We should.
Okay. Here's my wrap up. I'm going to go through all the 4 terms and I'm going to say I think why we like them or don't like them.
Do it.
Compliant is the worst one. It sucks. To me, it's just about behavior, which we kind of debated already. But it's also, it applies to so many other numbers. So many numbers are compliant with different things. So you can't just use that for 1, 2, and 6. Do you have anything else to say about why we hate compliant?
I think that's correct. I think mostly because 1s, 2s, and 6s can all become non-compliant.
Yeah. And it's not true, right? Yeah. All the time.
So it doesn't really, it's not helpful. Language, by its nature, the one thing language has to be is helpful. And so if it's not helpful, then, move on.
Dependent, we have different thoughts on, but we both agree that it's not the whole picture. It does not include the thinking repression of these numbers.
Correct.
That's my very short. Would you add anything onto that?
Yeah. I think when saying how it may be a valuable term supplementally, it's not a valuable term as the primary.
Yeah. Because it misses some things. And then responsive and reactive, we rate reactive above responsive because to us responsive means it sounds like people have taken some time to think about their response, which is not what's happening. Yes. And reactive is what's really happening, which is you see something and you react. And it's going to be different based on if you're a 1, 2, or 6, what it is that you feel like you have to react to. But you're reacting and you're not thinking.
I'm so thrilled that you landed there.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about how I really messed that up. I really should have printed that different. That was an oversight on my part.
Yeah. Nope.
You've given me the angle for justifying our scholarship.
Mm-hmm. I've been calling it responsive. I feel like I'm going to call it reactive now. So the one thing to set up a different conversation, reactive versus, do you call it the emotional realness triad? 4, 6, and
Actually,
8.
that is where I put responsive. Is that they're emotionally responsive. 4, 6s, and 8s.
So I think-
and that was another reason why we did the terminology.
Okay. Just foreseeing. A lot of people call the 4, 6, and 8 triad the reactive triad. So that would, bring up some debates and circles. But I like this for the reactive triad, for the stance.
I like the idea for 4, 6s, and 8s. I'm super comfortable saying they're pushing for an emotional response. They're not necessarily pushing for an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
I like the idea that they're pushing for an emotional response. And yeah, I do hear the overlap in terms, but
Yeah. And
we're being prescriptive about terms. So that's what the whole podcast is about.
Yeah, great. We can talk about that some other time.
Hey, Katie, you're the best.
You're the best.
Okay. Let's talk shop about aggressive types, assertive types next time.
Independent. Yeah, that's it. I wonder where I'll land. I have no idea.
Somebody told me that if you look closely, you can see the color of another man.